Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask the Amigos. And this is where Aaron and I answer all of Discord's burning questions. So, Aaron, we're going to kick things off right off the bat with a question from the slow Norris. He says, Hey, Boat, I've often seen you with a bass guitar hanging around. As a guitarist who doesn't play much anymore, I've recently gotten into bass myself. What's your history with bass guitar and who are your favorite bassists? My history with the bass guitar is also pretty short. I've always had a bass guitar hanging around. I have an old K bass from the late 50s that I got as a gift, but I never really played it because it was so hard to play. The action was super high and the pickups never worked right. But when I became a band director and I started doing more stuff with the jazz band, jazz bassists don't exactly pop out of the walls in middle school in student life. So I ended up playing bass a lot for them. And of course the Patreon band has inspired me to play a lot more bass. So I would say I'm a relatively new bassist, but it really gives you appreciation for the musicians. Some of my favorite bassists, probably Chris Squire is probably my favorite bassist because of not only his technique and the way that the way that his bass lines work, but also his ability to sing harmony and play at the same time is super impressive. Um, Carol Kay is a huge influence on me. Noel Redding, of course. I mean, he's probably the ultimate. But out of all of them, I really respect, and this is sort of a cop out answer, but Paul McCartney, his bass lines are so melodic. I mean, you don't expect bass lines from a group like the Beatles, even the early Beatles stuff. Some of those bass lines are surprisingly cool, and you don't really notice it. I'll tell you what happened was when I started playing Beatles Rock Band. And that was when I first started hearing those bass lines, and I was like, man, Paul is not only a tremendous, songwriter, but he really wrote melodically for the bass, and I much prefer that style of bass playing versus the sort of like slap funk bass and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that's all the bass talk that there is. Aaron, you want to add anything there?
Yeah, Nick said it. Geddy Lee, he's one of my faves. But I'll be honest with you, I'm one of these guys that I know what band's bass I like, but it's not like I can call out the dude's name. Like I like the
Right.
dude from Black Sabbath. Was that Geezer that played bass? I can't remember his name. He was
That
awesome.
sounds something. Yeah.
I like what's his name, Bootsy Collins. That the was this funky. I like that funky. I know you just badmouthed it, but I like that super funky slapping
I mean,
wackadoo
there's nothing wrong with
70s.
it. It's just not my favorite.
I
Yeah.
dig it. I love that because it's a part of it's just because I just like that kind of tunage. I'll tell you
Right.
the dude that plays bass for the freaking the Cure. I like that guy's bass
Well, his name
lines,
is
man.
Simon Legg.
Yeah.
No, that's a guy that I know in real life. I don't know Simon's last name, but his first name is definitely Simon. He's the only person that's been in the Cure besides Robert Smith since the beginning.
Listen,
Somebody in chat.
the Cure have some awesome bass licks, and
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
not it's not
absolutely.
like
He is
speed
very good. I
demony, but
agree.
it's just like it fits the songs. That literally makes their sound. If you're a big Cure guy, so there you
Yeah,
go.
I agree with you. That's a good call there. Dave Velociraptor asks, turn-based strategy or real-time strategy?
I would go with real time. I don't like either.
Hmm.
But I would say, for example, we played Populous 2 a couple weeks ago. I was kind of digging that boat. Now, it's a lot more, it's tougher for dummy to get into those games because they're harder. But I'm down. I'm down with that. I think that's the one I would go for. What about you?
I go back and forth. Sometimes I would say turn-based is probably my preference because the problem with real-time strategy games is that you run into an instance where your reaction time literally determines how good you are. And with a thinking game, like I can get by pretty well in like the campaign for StarCraft, but there reaches a point where it just gets to be too hard and I can't do it because I physically can't move the mouse fast enough. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, if you want to be a competitive real-time strategy player, you've got to have APM out the yin yang.
Yeah.
So I'll probably go the more board game turn-based style strategy. But just like you, strategy games are not my forte. Barkbit asks, is there a game you've bought or would buy just because the box is cool, although the game is crap?
Yes. You could pick the Psygnosis game of your choice in there. I love the look. I like when a company goes out and captures a look for their line. Activision did it, right? Atari did it. Psygnosis did it. And Psygnosis is the ultimate cool guy gaming company. You know, they got the cool font. They got pictures designed by some kind of dude that does album covers. You know, the names are cool guy. They got Beast and Kill and this and that. And you're like, oh yeah, that's the kind of stuff I like. The game is irrelevant. Plus they throw in a bunch of crap. So that's one. And another one I would go after, and I mean any of those, is some of the old Infocom games. Don't really want to play them, but the art was cool. The box was stuffed full of cool crap. You know, so I would put both those on the list.
I don't know. The Infocom was definitely the king of the feelies, but if you think about like the box art for the Zork games, it's not like a
Zork. Those aren't the ones I'm talking about. More like the what was their detective game? I always thought they had a really cool box art. Some of their games even had like different shapes. I thought they did a good job because you had to go bananas to make those appealing.
Right, and I would say on the whole, PC box art kills console box art because they, you know, in the PC world, they were doing everything they could to prevent people from pirating games, and so they really went all out on box art. Like, think about the box art for Transarctica, which I guess was that art originally had nothing to do with the game. They just thought, hey, that's a cool picture, let's use it for our game.
That's how you do it.
Yeah, I'm with you with Psygnosis. I mean, I've got this game behind me right now, Cytron. I have no idea what this game is. The chances are it's probably not great, but the art is freaking amazing.
I mean, and the thing is, some companies knew how to do it. You got to give Atari, the ancient Atari games, they had that awesome art that you've got in that book. You know, that incredible art. It's on the cartridge, and you're like, when you look at this, another one, and this is slightly off topic, but it's a little bit, is the way that the Odyssey 2's cartridges look. They're black. They're sleek. The art's sort of simplistic, but it's coming out at you. There's action involved. There's striking colors amongst that black background. It works. It works. It makes you want to collect them all, and it makes you want to play them, and that's what I like about them. But there are so many great pieces of art that are part of box art. I'll be looking through games all the time and just see awesome box art and never have heard of the game. You know, so I mean, it doesn't always mean you're going to make a lot of money, but it's nice to see that they went the extra mile on that. Another company that was real big about that. If you've ever played Cosmic Arc or any of those games, was
iMagic.
Yeah, iMagic. They actually would make models and stuff up, and they were expensive to make these covers, and so I appreciate that sort of effort.
Yeah, I can't add anything to your answer because I agree with 100% of what you're saying. So
I want to roll tonight, Boat.
Okay, so Super Famiking has posted this video, and his question is. He lists a lot of different accents like Liverpudlian, Cockney, Glasgowian, Brummie, etc. He says that accents across the British Isles are varied and strong. And then he asks, how difficult is it for a native West Virginian to understand broad accents from the UK?
It's very difficult if you're not us. For your average West Virginian, they would be in deep trouble because I've sat there and seen it. I've tried to show people shows and stuff, and they've got no idea what's going on. And I will admit, I've been watching a lot of it is based on, like, if you watch a lot of stuff with the BBC, right, or spend any time there. And I haven't, but I mean, and you're right. And by the way, accents in the States are just as, I mean, the West Virginia accent's one of the most difficult to understand for other people in the United States. I mean, I've went to places so country that it's hard as heck to know what they're talking about. And if you go down, as you go further south, the accent radically changes into another sort of country accent. But all that said, your average person would have a rough time, and even someone like me and Boat, and I'm sure you've ran into this, Boat, when you get a real cockneyed up accent, or maybe like someone that mixes in a lot of Welsh type stuff, it's real tough to figure out what the hell they're talking about.
What I find is that when people are, like, this happened to me in Ireland a lot, where it's like I'd be talking to Erla or somebody, and when they're talking to me, I could understand everything they were saying, but then they'd turn and they'd talk to one of their fellow countrymen, and it would be like they'd shift into another language because, like, I mean, like, I honestly, like, sometimes I would be like, I have no idea what they're saying. So that didn't happen in England so much. I went to school in South Yorkshire or wherever Sheffield is, and that's supposedly sort of like the south of England in terms of like the broad accents and all this stuff. And aside from some of the slang, I never had a hard time understanding. I always thought it always tickled me when Oasis was big here. They'd always put subtitles, whenever they would interview them on MTV or whatever.
Yeah.
But I always found them to be pretty easy to understand.
I'll tell you an accent that's tough to comprehend, and it was Edvin and his brother last Saturday night. Now,
Yeah,
that was
that was alcohol induced.
I can usually tell what they're saying, but about 2.5 hours into the TeamSpeak regulars, it shifted off the rails. I had no idea. I just nodded my head and gave them the thumbs up. I had no idea what they were talking about.
Brutal Barracuda asks, what is the one game you first played as an adult but wish you owned and grew up with as a child?
You better take that one. I went to ponder that one for a minute, Boat.
Oh boy, probably Elite. I feel like as a kid, I could have sunk a lot of time into a game like Elite because I love like trading simulations and stuff like that and being part of a world, like a world that really felt alive and a world that you had complete freedom to do whatever you wanted to do. As a kid, I was never exposed to any game like Elite before, and I wish that I had been.
I played everything as a kid because I was lucky enough to be there from pretty much the beginning. Okay, so I'm going to sort of change the question to suit my thoughts on it, and that would be everyone now is very, very much into these real deep first-person shooters. Sometimes they're squad-based, or sometimes they're and that is something that as a kid, of course, the first time we saw that was with in big time, was with your Wolfenstein 3D and your Doom. And then we were interested in it, but I never really stuck with that sort of game. And now I don't have that much interest in it, and it's huge, and I sort of want to be interested in it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
So I kind of wish that I had. I'm not saying that I
you kind of wish you'd gotten the bug early.
That's right. Saying. Like when those games came out, like when Doom came out. We liked Doom. It was awesome. But then when other games came out, right, we were like, oh, look, this is just another Doom. We had that sort of mentality, me and my buddies, and so we didn't get into it that much. And ultimately, they weren't just another Doom. They improved on things and things changed. It got more interesting, but I kind of missed the boat on that. Yeah. So, man, what are you going to do? But yeah, that'd be my answer.
Okay. Graham has 3 questions for us. He says, first question, he says, after I briefly showed War of the Worlds book on ICC, can you think of any other books that deserve the same refresh?
This is right up your alley, Boat.
You're going to have to remind me, Aaron, because my memory from that event is somewhat hazy due to things.
Well, he had a War of the War book. I don't remember I remember going off on it just because I like the.
Was it just like it was just like really? Oh, I remember this now. It was a reprint that was done with really good binding and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it was super fancy.
Yeah, super fancy. Okay, so yeah, what are some of your favorite books, Aaron, that you'd love to see like a really well bound, like presentation quality volume of?
It's one of those things. I'm an old school paperback guy. Don't care. So I'm just going to pick a book that I just really loved because I would like to see the fancy slant with a modern edge, and that would be Neuromancer. I'd like to see him go in there and mess with that, make it look really awesome.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. As you know, I have a couple hobbies. And one of my hobbies in the past has been to collect really expensive versions of books, whether they come from Heritage Press or whether they come from the Folio Society, Golden Cockerel, etc. And for a long time, I would refuse to read books unless they came in the editions that I approved of.
You were a book snob?
I was a book snob. And then one day I realized that was just monumentally stupid. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to get this paperback and I'm going to read the heck out of it. And it was this trade paperback I got for $1 at the Taylor Books down there in Charleston. And I was like, what have I been doing with my life where I'm confining my reading material to like these couple publishers, and just because like I like the feel of the page or whatever. And the problem is that when you want to read a book, sometimes you want to take it on vacation with you. Sometimes you want to throw it in a backpack. Sometimes you want to give it away. Sometimes you like it so much you want to give it to somebody. Well, if you pay $80 or $90 for a book, those decisions become much more difficult. And I got to the point where it's like I'd buy a Folio Society book, pay $80 for it, and then I'd turn around and I'd buy the Kindle edition for another $15 just to have something to read on the road. And So anyway, I'm glad that I put those days behind me. Now I'm a proud reader of, like I seek out like the beat up tatty paperbacks, especially like old Penguins from the 70s. Like they have some really awesome art and the pages are starting to fall apart and stuff like that. So, but anyway, I'm leaving Graham's question behind. You know, most of my favorite books have already been put out as fine editions. Um, I honestly don't know. I mean, if I could be in control of putting out, say, like, oh, you know what, I'd like to see maybe some of those old Worlds of Power novels. You know what I'm talking about, Aaron?
Mm-mm.
So these were sold all over the Scholastic Book Fair in the late 80s and early 90s. These were novelizations of Nintendo games. There was like a Metal Gear novel, a Blaster Master novel. I'd like to see a compendium of those novels bound up into some presentation quality binding with gilt edges and sewn, goat skin cover and stuff like that. I'm going to go with that.
I'm going to change my vote, by the way, and I'll tell you why. When me and the boy, part of our Saturday tradition is to after jiu-jitsu, we go down to the drive-in and get some lunch, and we always listen to a old time radio show, and we listened to one today, and it was a Ray Bradbury story that they had done, and it reminded me how much I loved Ray Bradbury. I used to read his stuff all the time. I know Ray Bradbury's so old school that a lot of people don't pick up on his stuff because they think it's kind of cliched sounding. But the problem is he's the one that originally did it and that caused the cliches in a lot of instances.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And so I love the Martian Chronicles. I know the movie sucks, and he disowned it. In fact, he has a story where he walked out in his own premiere. I'll never forget that. And he could be a little temperamental, but most of your big authors were. But I would love to see. I would love to have a real fancy bound set of the Martian Chronicles from him. I've always been a big fan, and I will say this is the first story my kid had ever heard from him, and it really struck a nerve with him. So it was nice to see someone that I really liked, strike a chord with my kid. So I'm going to go there.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, here's Graham's second question. He says, my children seem more trusting of facts on YouTube than Wikipedia, which is dangerous. Other than more engagement, as children don't seem to read much anymore, can you think of other strategies Wikipedia and similar reference sites can do to change this? You're a parent, Aaron. What do you think?
I doubt my kid's ever been to Wikipedia, and he goes on YouTube all the time. So that question is probably right. To be honest with you, I never thought about it. And he learns a lot about stuff from YouTube, which is... given that people like ourselves are on YouTube, it does disturb me to a certain degree. What can be done? Well, really, what's the big thing? Restricting your kid, paying attention to what they watch. I can go back and look at everything Luke watches. I sort of can monitor what he's doing, and most of the crap he watches is other dumb kids playing games or Pokemon stuff or stuff about games he likes. So I haven't seen anything that really. I thought to myself, oh my God, he's getting the wrong information about World War I or something, because kids don't generally care about stuff like that. I think this is probably not an issue. I mean, it depends on what they're looking up. If he was looking up historical-based stuff, and I wasn't familiar with who was putting it out, because we know there's a different slant on everything on YouTube, and even Wiki for that matter. I mean, it's not something you can hang your hat on all the time. So all you got to do, man, it's the same old story. It never changed. You got to be a vigilant parent that's interacting with their kid a lot. If you don't pay attention, things can get in their heads and cause trouble. I mean, I'm not King Dong of parents, Boat, as you know. I'm doing the best I can, so I'm not the guy to ask for parental advice. But one thing I can say, I think it stand out, is just be a part of your kid's life.
Yeah. All right. Question 3. I've noticed that skills like glass blowing and blacksmith work are becoming rare and fading away. Yeah. Are there any localized skills in West Virginia following a similar trend? So let's answer this. And he says, and on the flip side, he sees an increased interest in woodworking skills.
Yeah.
So I'll take this one first, and you can agree or disagree, Aaron.
All right.
But in my view, stuff like glass blowing and blacksmith work are sort of having a renaissance right now in West Virginia. If you go to any number of summertime fairs, fun fairs, the crap over at the Valley Park every year, Pumpkin Festival, you're going to see a whole convoy of blacksmiths that roll up
Yeah.
that are going to be showing off their wares. Same
Yeah.
thing with glass blowing, all that kind of thing. Now, we live in an area of the country that's very rural, and people move out here from other areas because they want to live this sort of life. You know,
Yeah.
they want to come back to nature. They want to learn a trade like blacksmithing or glass blowing. So even though they may be dying out in other parts of the country, I think in certain areas, like the area that we live in, those where they're kind of having a renaissance right now.
You know, my boss is a blacksmith, and you're right. He's got a whole horde of blacksmith buddies. They have little gatherings and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a good hand too. So I agree with you. I think now, listen, we talk about West Virginia all the time in the bad way, but this is one of the times where it's a good thing. You're right.
Yeah.
We have a world-renowned glass manufacturer, of glass art just right 10 miles away.
10 minutes from our house, yeah.
And not even 10 miles. Yeah, you're right, 5 miles away. We've got we have all sorts of local events where people come and do their blacksmithing and this, and so that stuff is not dying here. It probably is dying everywhere else, frankly, because one of the good things about being kind of backwards is that people kind of hold on to that old stuff. They take it; it's a little more sacred when your dad did it. Same reason, like you've got plenty of people over here picking the, fiddle and a banjo. It's because they grew up with their daddy and their daddy's daddy, and they all played that stuff. Get on the Vandalia Festival, and you're going to see glass blowers, you're going to see fiddle players and candle makers and fabric makers and everything, because that's what they did to live out in the sticks, out in the hills,
Right. Right.
In my opinion, the dying arts in this area, and this is going to sound something, stuff like, it's probably going to end up being stuff like coal mining. It's probably going to be something that is a profession that requires a deep learning, finesse, and intelligence to do it. It's not something you just go in there. You don't just get a lummox to go in there, but that sort of industry's dying. I think in this area, the dying industries are what you're going to lose, as opposed to the art. You're right. West Virginia has we have a lot of artists coming in as opposed to leaving. So that's one of the few areas where we're ahead of the curve, is
I agree.
Artisans, including art, like painting, photography, musicians. We've got that, and that's one of the best things for living around here is there's all kinds of great festivals and stuff, and you're never without good music or good food or people that have a lot of skills in woodworking and whatnot.
That's right. That's right. All right. Lobsterminator asks, if you had to choose a single regular meal you would eat for the rest of your life without any variation, what would it be?
Pizza.
Pizza's tempting. I would probably go for something that had I would go for probably something that it would be more like boy, it's tough. Pizza's such a good answer.
Yep, because you can have all the different stuff on it. Plus, if you want to, you could just rake all the stuff off of it. You got bread. You rip the pizza off, you got bread sticks. If you want some pasta, you could sort of simulate it. You could. So that's
that's a good choice. If I had to leave pizza, I would say maybe something like bibimbap, which is a Korean. It's a Korean dish that has rice, vegetables, a fried egg, and spicy paste on the top. Just because there is a ton of variation on that as well. Now, what if you couldn't change it? Like, what if it had to be pepperoni pizza? Would that change your answer, Aaron?
No. Did you say bibimbap? Did I get that right?
Yeah, bibimbap. That's right.
That sounds like a Korean boy band to me. That's what I would name my band. Bibimbap. No, pizza. Because what other meal? I mean, I could say rice, right, or noodles, right? But I mean, one would, if you had all the accoutrement that you would want to put on the noodles, that'd be great. But if you just eat noodles or rice, that's
you
gonna
gotta have
suck.
Toppings.
You gotta have something.
I agree with you that pizza is the ultimate answer because, like you said, you can get whatever toppings you want on it. So.
In all honesty, eating something from now until the end of time, I don't care what it is. It could be it could be anything, lady fingers or pizza or spaghetti. You're gonna be so sick of it in like a week.
Right.
You're gonna be boned. So
yeah.
Plus,
Absolutely.
maybe after you've had 6 years of pizza, you could also roll up the dough and use it to choke yourself to death and end all this misery.
All right. Let's see. Ricky DeRocher asks, when is the Amigos 3.11 show coming out? When are we going to start a podcast all about Windows games, Aaron?
Were you there when I did the 3.11 stream a couple weeks ago?
Listen, I'm the one that requested ski free.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something. Having played Barbie on the old Windows, Windows 3.1 has the goofiest, most out there collection of weirdness I've ever seen assembled on one system. So I don't see a podcast in it, Boat. I don't see a 3.11 podcast coming anytime soon. I had one night of 3.11 and I was satiated, my friend.
All right. This next question comes from me, Aaron. What is the deal with the whole too sweet thing?
Too sweet?
Yeah. Why do people do that?
Well, I can only speak for the wrestling thing. It's a wrestling thing.
Well, it comes from wrestling. That's why I asked you. Like,
do they do
where
that?
Did it come...
They do that outside of wrestling, like at the school or something? Is that when you saw it?
Like
You're kidding me.
Kids too sweet each other all the time.
No kidding. Well,
yeah.
Originally, there was an outfit called the NWO, and they would do that.
I remember them. They were on Thunder.
What's that?
They were on Thunder.
They were on Nitro and Thunder, WCW. And it was Scott Hall, Kevin Nash, Hulk Hogan, and a cast of thousands. And they would end all their promos with the phrase, because we're too sweet. And they'd touch each other's thumb and their fingers together.
Coyote fingers, if you're familiar with Soul.
And so it became real stupid and cliche and dopey. And so an outfit called the Elite, led by the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, picked it up as sort of their... it was almost a mocking of the original, because it was just so dopey. And these guys were a bunch of dopey goofballs. And so they've gotten popular. And so I guess kids have picked it up. I didn't realize that was being done in schools again. But yeah, it's really, it doesn't mean anything.
Bullet Club is like they're the WWF new spokespeople.
Well, the Bullet Club, by the way, all Black Lives Matter in the chat, he's clearly this is a guy who knows a little bit about New Japan Pro Wrestling, among other things. Bullet Club was the Young Bucks, Kenny Omega. It's been a cast of thousands, but yeah, that's where it started. And effectively, as I recall, the WWE sent them a cease and desist on doing the too sweet.
So the Bullet Club is not part of the WWE.
Well, no. At the time they were in New Japan, and really the Bullet Club it still exists in New Japan, but it's a whole different cast of guys. The guts of the Bullet Club are now on AEW, which are Young Bucks, Kenny Omega, and the Good Brothers, and they still do it, even though they're not supposed to. So yeah, it's just their dumb wrestling thing. Just like any other dumb wrestling thing. It'll come and go, but it's just a kind of a hokey thing.
Okay. Duncan Styles asks, if you could write a script for a TV show or movie, what would it be?
Oh, it would be I'd like to write one of those coming of age films that draws upon the stuff that I saw and or did in high school and early college.
So it'd be like Stand By Me, but based on your life.
Oh, it'd be much more disgusting than that. It would be much stupider than that. Stand By Me, I really kind of like that film. Actually,
yeah, it's a great movie.
I'm talking more of like I'm less Stand By Me and more Porky's. I guess would be where I would be going with my. What about you?
I'd really like to write a I'd like to write a sci-fi show like Firefly.
Oh yeah.
Like, I think it would be cool. Like, the whole concept of Firefly, of course, is not unique to Firefly, where you have, like, this roving band of miscreants that runs around the galaxy doing good deeds, and fighting the bad guy of the week. I'd like to be on the staff of a new Star Trek series. I think that would be cool. Sci-fi and fantasy stuff, I just feel like the people that are doing it don't understand why people like to watch those kinds of shows. And I feel like it's not like I'm a great writer and I'd be able to do anything positive, but I just like to be there and be able to put in my 2 cents, and people respect my opinion.
I love the Firefly, as you know. I love that show. And it had endless potential. Like I said, the rogues in space, the heart of gold, that type thing.
Right.
I think sci-fi lost its way a long time ago, and it still continues to wander like a zombie through the night. Just kind of, if you watch any of the newest Star Trek shows, some of this other stuff, I haven't liked any of it. I have not liked what's come of Doctor Who. They've forgotten what got them to the dance, and maybe it's a sign of the times, Boat. because much like we were talking about Bradbury earlier, if you look at what Ray Bradbury wrote and you read it now, you're like, look at this crap, look at this cliched crap. Well, there was a purity to it and an innocence to it, because when it was written, he was the first one that did it. Sci-fi has been done and done and done and done, and so everyone has to put a new spin on it and try a new angle, or make it more extreme or whatever. It's hard to capture what made sci-fi brilliant in the early days of your Star Treks and that sort of thing. And it's going to take someone with a lot of cleverness and a lot of good ideas to bring it back. And that's one of the things I liked about Firefly. They took that concept and they did something fresh with it.
Let me ask you another question. Yeah. This just popped in my head. But why is it that horror is the only genre that ever gets anthology series?
Well, that's not true. So, because if you ever watch Black Mirror, for example,
but I mean that is
or Love and Robots or Twilight Zone or The Outer Limits, these weren't horror; these were sci-fi.
But these are all maybe horror, but it's sort of like creepy, like unsettling themes.
What about Alfred Hitchcock Presents, for example? Or Tales of the Unexpected.
But those are all old shows.
Well, I mean, but you're saying that they ever got these things. Tales of the Unexpected was
There's
all
never
over
been
the
a
map.
comedy anthology series, is what I'm saying. There's never been a fantasy anthology
What about
series.
Love American Style? That was a comedy anthology series. What about Love Boat or Fantasy Island? There were elements of comedy in those. They'd have Don Knotts on there occasionally. I guess you sort of can call those if you're going to call Love Boat an anthology, but they're enclosed episodes. I mean, you're right. Okay, but I mean, what would you like to see? A comedy anthology show where every week something funny happens?
No, but I would like to see, I think a fantasy anthology show would be cool, where it's like every week you get like a little 30 minutes of like some wacky alien world where people breathe through their toenails.
You did see that in magazines. Okay, and I'll refer you to Heavy Metal, for example. Mm-hmm. That was their bread and butter. If you go, and I don't mean the film, although it's a good watch. Let me tell you something. I'll tell you, a fantasy anthology show, I'm all on board, except for there's one big problem. You've got to come up with a weekly. There's two problems. You got to come up with a weekly fantasy script that's not crap, not easy to do, as you know. And secondly, you've got to pony up the cash to make that show. Unlike horror, where you can just kind of put some blood on it and you're good to go, right. or a crime show or something like Tales of the Unexpected, a fantasy show is going to be involving fantastic creatures, that sort of thing, and it's going to cost some bucks.
That's why, I feel like something like Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Remember Jim Henson did that. He actually did an anthology series. I can't believe I didn't think about this until now. It was called The Storyteller. Do you remember that?
I did, and they did several. Well, I mean, he was also involved with the whole Spielberg thing. Listen, The Storyteller didn't last that long.
Right, and I think the reason why is because of what you talked about.
Yeah,
it was very expensive to produce.
Look at something like Amazing Stories, which was a real hit and miss anthology show. If you remember that from the Spielberg.
I don't remember that.
It was It was a primetime show on NBC for quite a while, but it was expensive, and the stories were a mixed bag. It's hard to come up with that stuff every week, And so, in the age of streaming services, where you can come up with a whole series of shows and not do another one for a couple years, now is the time to do that. But it's not easy. Science fiction is a lot easier, and horror is a lot easier, and there have been plenty of great anthology shows in that area. Fantasy, you're right. It's untapped, I think, for the most part.
Yeah. All right. Coming up next is, let's see here. Lord Soup has a question for me. He says, John, you have no love for first-person block move dungeon crawlers such as Eye of the Beholder and Dungeon Master.
No kidding.
Do you think they can be saved in your sight if upgraded or modified in some way? How would you make a game in that style that doesn't leave you cold? It's a great question, Soup. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you the reason why I dislike these games. There are really two big reasons. One, when I play a video game, I want to play a game. I want to be in a world that I actually want to exist in and explore. Okay, so if you think about a game like Skyrim, that's a whole world to explore, and it's awesome. Or if you play a game like Super Mario Brothers, that's another world to explore. When you play a game like Dungeon Master, you're in a dark, dank, dungeon, um, and that's no place that I want to hang out in. That and to be honest with you, that's a big part of the video. If I dislike or like a video game, is the setting of the game itself.
It's not
Okay, now
always
you can
like that though. I mean, dungeon crawl. Listen, I'm an old D&D
let,
guy.
let me finish.
All right.
So that's one thing, and the other thing is the sheer repetitive nature of those games, and that you're always just you're mapping it out, and you're fighting bad guys, and you're collecting things to keep you alive. That's good for part of the game, but I need another part of the game where you emerge from the dungeon and you go to another area. Like, for example, when you're role playing, you either start or you finish a lot of role playing experiences in a tavern or in a town where you're mixing it up with the locals, and then you delve into the dungeon. So if you're going to save that kind of game for me, what you need to have is some sort of intermission, some sort of breathing period, some sort of Rivendell, where you can escape sort of the high intensity action of the dungeon, where you can go outside, breathe the fresh air, see the sunshine, and interact with other people.
If I may, just hop in for a moment. You're not.
Go, man.
I'm not going to disagree with you. And we all have our own tastes, obviously.
Yeah, yeah.
And those games have not aged well. All right, we could agree with that. There are certain aspects that we've come to expect as gamers that they don't have, most of them. I think one of the big shortcomings, and we've got some people in the chat have mentioned a couple of games that had outside segments and whatnot. Listen, I'm an old school D&D player. You know that, Bode.
Mm-hmm.
I'll look to my right here. There's a shelf full of old school Dungeons and Dragons modules. Okay, and one of the things I liked about Dungeons and Dragons was the varied areas you go. It's not all dungeons, despite the name. And even when you're in dungeons, it's not just the gloomy crap you're talking about. And really, you're right. In gaming, that's what's mostly portrayed. Okay, and I think I'm going to go with the fact that the games we're playing are old, and they were limited in their ability to make these palettes and make these various images. But in proper D&D, you go into places that are made of crystal, or glorious caverns that are 1,000 foot high with waterfalls,
right,
or places that shimmer with a fluorescent fungi that emanate from the walls or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you play something like White Plume Mountain, you come into an area where it's a reverse pyramid with various creatures behind glass that you have to go through all these varied atmospheres that make the game better. Listen, you can't. There's one of the reasons I never liked role playing games on the PC is because you can't successfully emulate a live action role playing event on a computer. You just can't do it. Even when you're playing with your buddies over over like a video chat, you can't do it. There's an intangible quality to being there with your friends and having someone unfurl this stuff in front of you. It makes it awesome. But I would wager that today they could make a really good like Eye of the Beholder style game with a lot more varied environments than they did back in the day. Maybe that would appeal to you more.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason that made that game that we played, Black Dawn Rebirth, so disappointing. Was that here's a chance for that genre to sort of redeem itself in my eyes personally, and all you get's the same old crap. You get the same tile set for the walls and everything.
I think that was more of a tribute, though. So you got to look at it like a tribute.
And it's fine because some people love that stuff.
That's
but for
right.
me, yeah, for me, it's just it's not there, and you're exactly right. Like, I would have no problem with dungeon crawlers if you did have those varied environments, but you don't. And I fully concede that for the people that love those games, they love getting into it with the graph paper. That's part of the game.
For you, Boat?
What's that?
Have you ever played one of my D&D games?
I don't know that we've ever run a D&D module. We've done lots of other stuff, but
I would love to get
probably.
you in on one. I've got a couple here in mind. That'd be a lot of fun. I'd love it, man. Because D&D is one of these games that really it opens you up and it makes your mind expand and it's so much fun to be around a table with your friends playing a game like that. It can't be replicated on a computer. What to put that on the list after the COVID's gone, Bode.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Crabs MTG asks, Which DCI show is your favorite, and why is it SCV 1974? So, we'll talk a little bit about drum corps. So, drum corps is like competitive marching band to the extreme, and drum corps is a big part of my youth. I was a big fan. SCV 1974, Santa Clara Vanguard 1974, probably the peak. It's a great show. That was back, Aaron. You are old, but you're not quite so old that in marching band they still marched with everything, including the percussion equipment. When you were in marching band, they still had the pit on the side of the field, right, where the marimba was and all that stuff.
We didn't have much in the pit at the time.
But if you go back to the 70s, back when it was technically against the rules to have anything at the side of the field, you had people marching timpani. They'd strap those things to their back. You had somebody in a little cage.
We had the
timpanis. We had somebody in a cage with the chimes that would march around like that.
When we used chimes, I'm trying to think what was on that sideline. It was very little.
Yeah,
but we had timpanis that marched, complete with the big harness, the whole you're going to plow a field. I'm trying. Really, the only thing I could think of that they'd set on the sidelines, you'd have your field conductor and the little staircase or whatever they were working on, and usually you would have that the chime thing. It was a big rack of of those. I don't when I left, they upped their game on the sideline. They have a bass guitar over there, a bunch of crap. And by the way, I hated it. I hated that.
Bass guitar is no good.
I love bass guitar, but I didn't see
not in marching
That's
band.
when they had the guy dressed up like Elvis. I remember going to one of the home football games, and I was like, "What the hell is this? This is crap." They wouldn't let us do this crap, and plus they stopped marching. Like we never stopped. We had to do shapes to continuously.
I can tell you that you are perfectly at home with everybody that's ever been in a marching band before, in which the time that they were in the marching band was the best, and every time after that was crap.
Listen,
everybody believes that since the beginning of time.
I'm not going to say that we were. I don't know what when he said DCI. I thought that was like a DC Universe video thing. I had no idea what you're talking about. So, but listen, proof's in the pudding. We brought home the big money, pal. I don't have to say we're the best. That's in the trophy case back at the pad, brother. We won it all. We were the king dongs of the band. Now, of that year, it's just like anything else. Is Michael Jordan better than Wilt Chamberlain? I don't know. Is LeBron James better than Michael Jordan? I don't know. It's hard to compare them. All I'm saying is we're in the conversation. That's all I'm saying.
Blue Train asks, and this is Hat Chad, by the way, just in case you were not aware.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay. I never knew that.
Yeah, Blue Train is Hat Chad.
Okay.
Do you really hate the Patreon song, or is your reaction like one might find in the squared circle, i.e. overly dramatic and fake?
No, I do hate it. In fact, I remember when I was funny. I've been going back to doing research for the 300th episode. What are we on now? We just did 295. So not too far down the line. And I was looking back, and I found the first ever. Of course, then I hate you sometimes because I told Bo, like, look, I did this research and I found the first Patreon song, and I found the first time you did this. And Bo sent me a list. Who was it? Pixels or somebody had done that had every Patreon song from every episode. I can't believe someone's documenting that. That's astounding to me. But all that said, I went back and listened to the very first one, and even back then, I was like, what is this? What are you doing? And I remember I asked him after the show, what the hell was that? And then he did it again, like about 6 shows later. I'm like, what is this? And then you started making it a weekly thing. I'm like, no. But I will say, often imitated, a lot of people started implementing weird Patreon crap, and you had no plan. Did you have a plan for this? You didn't know what you were doing. You were just screwing around, right?
Yeah, I've never had a plan for anything I've ever done related to this show. So
yes. That's
Real
what we
Barracuda asks, are you Team Kong or Team Godzilla?
Oh man, that's a tough choice, Boat. What are you? Who do you like more, Kong or Godzilla?
Oh, I'm 100% Kong.
Really?
Kong is kind of like Frankenstein. Innocent, misunderstood.
I'm gonna go. Listen, I'm an old Mystery Science Theater fan, as you know, and I've got to go with Godzilla.
Really?
Yeah. Godzilla's done a lot of hilarious stuff. He's boxed. He's danced. He's done a bunch of fun.
He is wacky.
Like, you don't see Kong doesn't pop up in the old Japanese movies much, but Godzilla's on all of them. Godzilla and Mothra and Gamera and all these guys. And Godzilla is amusing, and his powers are also goofy. Can he slide on his tail? Sure, sometimes. Can he fly? Okay, why not? Does he box? Does he dance when he boxes? Yes, he does all that stuff. He's a big weird lizard. He breathes electricity, fire. It depends on what you're watching.
You might be winning me over here.
Kong is just a big monkey. Can Kong climb stuff? Yeah. Does he like bananas? Probably. Does he like hot chicks? Who doesn't? Right? But Godzilla does all kinds of crazy stuff. That's why I like him.
Yeah. Okay. What do you think about that King Kong movie that came out a couple years ago?
I didn't see
it. The one I think it was M. Night Shyamalan. It was some famous director.
He didn't do it. I know him. Now there's a new one out right now.
No, this is the one that was before then.
I never saw that one. I saw the hideous, horrible Godzilla reboot. But then
that was the worst.
They've done a Godzilla movie recently that was supposed to be pretty good, and then this new one I heard was okay. I don't know, a modern take on a monster movie. When you've watched as much old Godzilla movies as I have, it's hard for me to get excited about a modern one. It just seems, it's like, let's go out and make the finest, technologically superior Model T we can. Well, why would we do that?
Right.
Because that takes the fun out of it.
Product of post-war atomic anxiety.
Right. We want crazy.
Peter Jackson. Jackson. That's who I'm thinking of.
I didn't see that. I like it when Godzilla as a guy in a suit, stomping on an obviously fake town while explosions go. That's what I like. That's what I want. I don't want a realistic version of Godzilla because that's stupid. I like the fake one. That's just me.
Duncan Stiles asks, which Amiga game would you like to see made into a successful Hollywood blockbuster? I'm thinking Alien Breed, as I would love to hear that tune over the opening credits in a cinema.
Not that one. No. And you don't like it either that much.
Alien Breed's overrated to the max.
So does anything spring to mind for
Tons.
you? Because Transantarctica would be a good one, but it's already been done.
I mean, when you think about all of the Amiga games, as we all know, are
don't watch 9/10. Watch it. Go ahead. Don't bury it.
Okay, I'm controlling myself. I'm gonna go with Chaos Engine because post-apocalyptic settings are popular right now.
Good choice.
You've already got the characters. You got the gentleman. You got the what's his name? The protractor, the farmer, the miscreant, whatever their categories are. You've got them all. Yeah, the ranger.
You just made all those up. You don't know any of the characters in that game.
Yeah, but anyway,
that's a good choice though, despite your stupidity. I think.
Yeah. Here's another one. Any of the Cinemaware games, like Wings. Think about all the World War I.
Well, Wings is sort of based on a film.
Is it really?
Yeah. I mean,
what's it based on?
I think the film was called Wings. Actually, it was like a silent film.
Maybe not that one then.
Yeah,
Aaron, if you were going to cast Lionheart, who would you cast as the lead?
There's only one guy that can pull it off. That's me. I would be the lead in Lionheart. I can
see that.
I want to give Olaf a shout out because an excellent choice. That's not the one I was thinking of, but that's an excellent choice. I wouldn't mind seeing I know you hated it, but I think Walker would be fun to see as a film. That'd be kind of cool. I like the fact that there's a huge robot. And I like the fact
what would the story be?
Well, he went through time. All right. And something else I like is the fact that you're the
would
good.
Would Walker be anthropomorphic?
Is that a word?
Would he walk and talk on his own accord?
No.
Would he have a little Walker mouth?
No, he wouldn't. No, he's just the main guy. Because if you think about it, okay, so Walker was the good guy, right? You're playing Walker, but you're mowing down suckers with wagons and crap. Yeah. So I'd like to see how they pulled that off. How did they make this guy good guys? He mows down guys in wagons and horses. So that would
I would say Walker's probably the heel.
That's what I would say too. That's exactly what I would say.
What if Walker met Walker?
That would be
Walker?
Well. He would assumably he would cut him in half with his guns, which would be okay. But I like Chuck Norris. I'm not gonna badmouth the guy, but I like Walker. And of course, it came from the desert, but it's already been made.
It's already been done.
So we can't say that one. I'm trying to think what there are a few Killing Game Show. I kind of like that game, but of course
Isn't
that's
that
sort of already
been, Running Man.
It's sort of already been done, sort of, kinda, So, but yeah.
What about if they made? Have they ever remade the Three Stooges?
Yeah, it was great. It had Will Sasso in it a couple years. It was really good, surprisingly
so
good.
They've already done that.
I went into that movie expected to kill it. And I actually enjoyed it. So get out of here. Get out of here, Graham. My God.
All right, so here we go. Comes to us from Frodo NL. He says, which modern, which is from the last 20 years, game would you like to see an Amiga version of?
So this would be a modern game released on the PC or one of the consoles. That's what we're talking about.
So you'd like to see an Amiga version.
Do you have a thought on that, Boat?
Probably one of the phone games that have taken over these days.
Phone game?
Yeah. Something like Crossy Road, I think would be really cool on the Amiga. The Amiga could do really well.
I don't know what that is. What is that?
Crossy Road, it's like an endless Frogger that's in an isometric 3D. Pretty much any game that is arcade action would do pretty well on the Amiga. Any game that, on the role-playing side of things or whatever, I just think wouldn't work. But I think, I'm going to go with Crossy Road. I think that would be great on the Amiga.
That's pretty good. As I badmouth you, I'm trying to think what I would think would be. I'm playing this game a lot on my phone called Retro Bowl. We covered it on ARG one time. It's this football game, but all the controls are sort of like Angry Bird style controls, and I think the Amiga mouse could kind of pull it off.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go with that. That'd be kind of fun.
Listen, you could take, the most casual of casual games, the games the Chud plays all the time on his tablet. You could take one of those on the Amiga, it would be a million seller.
You think? Even today? It would...
Yeah.
Are there a million Amigas on the earth right now?
The Amiga crowd is always looking for new stuff. And those games, obviously, they're well designed. You just take down all the paywall stuff.
Do you ever wish that you could, program a game?
Every day of my life.
Really? Because wouldn't it be neat to, the guy, you ever listen to a Retro Roundup? It's the guys
over there. SoCal Mike show?
That's right. Well, Mike's off of it now, but it's Subaru Brat and UK Mike and some other guys. Anyway,
Dinosaur Pie.
That guy's on there. But anyway, before SoCal left, they did a game. It was like the Retro Roundup game, right? And I thought to myself, wow, that's wacky. They made a game based on the show. And so I thought,
if you were going to make a game based on Amigos, what would it be?
It would have to be like a singing game. Because you've played Rock Band, right? Every time in Rock Band that you sing out of tune, you get penalized, right? In the Amigos version, every time you sing out of tune, that's when you get the points. Anytime you're in tune, that's when you lose the points. That's the game.
How many points do you get when you put on a Jeff Lynne wig?
Do you get all the points? That's when you get it. I don't know anything about that.
That's the end. That's how you beat the game.
That's right. So there you go. So yeah, that would be fun. But no, I don't know what I said. Keep going.
Chris Folds asks, he says, with the exception of Rare, the development studio Rare, under the guidance of Nintendo, I can't think of any Euro-developed platformers in the 80s and 90s that are worth playing. Why do you think that is?
Well, that's a little...
Okay.
Hold on now.
Okay.
I don't know about that.
You want me to answer first? Because
that's not right, for starters.
Chris expects me to side with him, but I'm going to disagree.
Oh! Good for you, Boat.
Listen, there's games,
Delphine's out there,
platformers that are worth playing. Number one on the list is the freaking Addams Family. That is a console quality platformer par excellence.
Move away from the consoles.
Not all. Yeah. You were expecting me to say the Addams Family, but I'm going to go on.
Yeah, I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think Lionheart is a fine. It's not for me, okay, because I think the levels are too long and it's too hard because I'm a weenie. But I think Lionheart is definitely worth playing. I think it's definitely worth playing.
Mm-hmm.
What are some other ones, Aaron?
Let me tell you something. Listen, any of the Delphine games, those games are gold. Plus, you've got your Prince of Persia is a great game. That can't be understated how great that one is. Listen, 80s and 90s. My God, we've done tons of games that have merit to them. I mean,
if you're going to go 80s and 90s, because he doesn't even talk about if they're on the Amiga or not. Like all the Rayman games, those are all French games.
So you're talking about any game on any console or system?
He just says 80s
Holy
and
cow!
90s.
What about like Mario? For God's sakes, if you could pick any game, you could pick any of those games. But listen, no one kills platformers on the Amiga more than us.
Yeah.
We kill the hell out of these platforms. We enjoy driving the knife into to these Super Frog and whatnot. But there were plenty of good ones. And I think that's a little tough. That's a little tough on those games.
Rough and Tumble, also another great platform.
What was the game where you played the two guys with the boot with the 50s hairdos?
Naughty Ones.
Not well, Naughty Ones was good
Joe.
too. Yo Joe.
Yo Joe a lot more than I did.
Joe was fun. I like that 2-player action. That was a good game. Even Brian the Lion was kind of fun. We kind of dug that.
Yeah. So there's games we're playing. But here's the problem. The problem is that the good platformers on the consoles are so good and so much better than everything else. People tend to forget that there were like 80% or 90% or even 95% of the platformers on consoles were also crap. It's just that everybody remembers the Marios. Everybody remembers the DuckTales.
Right. And, as you look at platformers now, it's 2021, okay? If you go back and you're like, well, look at these Amiga platforms compared to the Super NES. What a ripoff. Well, I mean, that's not the way the playfield laid out back in the day. It's hard to compare the two. There were good stuff. I mean, can the Amiga hold a candle to the Super Nintendo when it comes to platforms? Hell no. But it's not like everything was garbage. It was just different stuff. Even if you go back to stuff, to like Jumpman and stuff. Is Jumpman a quality platformer? Hell yeah, it is. Is Miner 2049 a quality platformer? Hell yeah, it is. Is that game Brent picked for the Atari a couple weeks ago? That Miner 2049 ripoff? Is that a good game? Hell yeah. Is Manic Miner a good game? You got that right. There's plenty of good ones. So I disavow that. I don't agree with it.
Yeah. And it also depends on what kind of platformer you're after. Platformer is such a broad term. Like Jumpman is a platformer, but it's almost a different genre than a game like Super Mario Brothers. So
correct.
It depends on what you're after.
Yeah.
All right, Aaron. Our final question of Ask the Amigos this month is about the Sex Pistols.
Okay.
Are the Sex Pistols legends of punk or just a racket?
Who asked this?
That would be Jonah.
That's a good question. Because first, as performers, they were a mixed bag. Johnny Rotten sucked. All right, I think we could all agree with that. But as a punk band, they were the punkiest of the punk bands, weren't they? I mean, they sort of were right there, causing trouble. What do you think?
Both. I mean, you can be both. You can be a racket, and you can be playing a role, and you can also be musically relevant. I mean, pop music itself is half image and half substance. I mean, look at the Beatles. Look at anybody you want. They've got a look, they've got a way about them, and then they've also got the music. The Sex Pistols came along at just the right time. They had just the right attitude, the devil may care attitude, and they had some catchy tunes. So yeah.
And it's funny. I like Johnny's stuff with PIL a lot more than the Sex. I mean, listen. I mean, Sid Vicious was absolutely dreadful. Okay, we can agree on that. As a musician, as a person, just a piece of garbage. But I mean, when you're the premier punk band, it's not like you're going to have a bunch of choir boys in the band. You got a bunch of hacks, liquored up, drugged up goofballs, Lydon is a guy, and I was sad to see that he utterly sold out as he got older. But he did, I mean, and you can say what you want about his ability to quote-unquote sing, okay? And by the way, this predates both of us, because even I wasn't, I mean, I was alive, but it's not like I had my finger on the pulse of the punk scene in the late 70s. I was like 8, Right. And really, the punk scene didn't even hit here until years later. I mean, the punk scene in America didn't really catch on. It was probably, I'm going to say 7 years. I mean, in terms of what it was like a bigger movement. There's going to be a lower level to it, but I mean, I would say the mid 80s is when the punk scene took off in the States. All right. And that's my opinion, because I had friends in it. So that's, there you go.
Who was in it? Was Theo in it?
No, but I had friends that were into punks, and I hated punk bands. I liked actual bands, But punk as a performance was not what I would call good sounding music, but it was what it was. It wasn't supposed to be. It was more of a movement, right? It was more of a state of mind than it was a something you would put out there and expect to go up the charts, right? And the Sex Pistols, if you look at it in that way, they were the perfect punk band. Their music, in quotes, was generally regarded as crap, but their attitudes, the way they operated, the way they were perceived, they were perfect for that sort of movement that ended up being what punk was.
Yeah.
And when they sort of fizzled out, and I know in the UK they were way ahead of us in the whole punk thing. And like I said, in America, we were kind of way behind. We were playing catch up on that. But it did have an impact, and it brought that sort of... We went from the punk scene to sort of that new wave scene that was Blondie and Flock of Seagulls and that kind of stuff. And it transitioned over to... And it's funny how that went from... at some point, someone had enough of that, and they kind of went back to rock. And so there was a transition from sort of that new wave back into rock that dominated the middle part of the 80s that ended up going to the grunge sound, but it is a transitional stage. It's very strange that I mean, you can see the transition from punk to new wave. It's hard to see the transition from new wave to rock because I don't think there was one. I think between new wave and disco, rock fans from the 70s and 60s got sick of that music and just took back over. And effectively, and it sort of burned itself out. Am I talking out my butt here, but what do you think about it?
Well, I mean, there was a punk scene in the 70s for sure in localized areas.
There was.
It wasn't a nationwide.
It wasn't a
thing.
Movement, though. So I'm saying
Right.
It's a local.
Yeah, I mean, like if you look, like people are talking about in the chat, like the New York Dolls,
right,
and in clubs like CBGBs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but it
Iggy
wasn't
Pop, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, MTV was not playing the punk videos until later on, for sure. Of course, MTV wasn't even around in the late 70s.
And that stuff always got played at, like, off hours and stuff. They weren't playing Graham mentions the Dead Kennedys. My buddies were all big fans of the Dead Kennedys. They loved Jello Biafra. And I listened to all the Dead Kennedy albums, all of Jello's solo stuff, his spoken word album. How many people can say that they heard that? I heard the whole darn album, because my buddies were all into it. But I mean, by the time that stuff was, the Dead Kennedys were kind of at the tail end of it, at their apex, but it went away. And I'm not sure straight America even knows what the punk movement was. I mean, do you think
here's
they
the
do?
thing. Like, coming at it from a generation beyond you, there was a resurgence in punk music in the mid 90s, and it all started with Green Day. Like, Green Day was like the punk music that was acceptable for the masses. And they were a massive success, and there were tons of other punk bands. And of course, the whole thing about punk is like, how punk are you? And it's sort of stupid because it becomes like this litmus test of like, how much urine have you emanated on your audience? That's how much, that's how punk you are. So, but I don't know. I feel like what was a local scene didn't become national until MTV. But before MTV, nothing was really a national scene except for what was on pop radio. And punk music by its very nature would be, not acceptable for any kind of pop radio. So it would be difficult for any kind of punk movement to gain notoriety until it gained acceptance, at least through the MTV crowd.
I will say this. And by the way, when I lived in Huntington, I lived 2 doors down from a punk bar. I mean, and so when you talk about urinating on the crowd, I was around when G.G. Allen came to town. If you're a punk guy, you know who G.G. Allen is.
Or just a fan of like ridiculous performance art.
Filth. But
yeah,
my views on the whole punk thing are skewed because I knew people that were in it, right? But let's face facts. Your average person in West Virginia, for example, or probably anywhere, unless you're like New York or LA or something, the punk movement probably could have came and went. You never knew it even was there.
Exactly. I mean, it could have totally come and gone because it made no impact on the national scene during the 80s. Like, I'm sure you've seen that movie Heavy Metal Parking Lot, where it just goes around like this Judas Priest. It's a great film. If you haven't seen that, everybody that's watching Ask the Amigos right now, after we're done, watch Heavy Metal Parking Lot on YouTube. But it's like that was sort of like the edgy music. Like if you were into stuff that like made your parents uncomfortable, it would be heavy metal. It wouldn't be punk.
Right. If you think about what you said about Green Day, you're right. Because But I mean, if you think about Green Day and the stuff that got popular, it was as far away from punk as you could go. I mean, really, punk that I knew.
Musically, it really wasn't. Musically, it was very similar to any kind of like Sex Pistols or Ramones song.
No, it was way better. Those guys were talented. They could actually sing and play their instruments. I mean, listen, I was at Corrosion of Conformity played down in Nitro one time, right? You ever seen them live? I know they have a name.
I don't even know who that is. Well, I'm not a huge punk guy.
Listen, I know. Okay, some people know who they are, and some people don't. Right?
Look at that. Dave knows who.
Or like Life, and like they were on a bill with Life Sentence, and I'm trying to think who the other third act was. But listen, I mean, punk is. I'm going to offend somebody, but it's crap. But it's crap by nature. That's right. What it is.
That's what it is.
You know, yeah. And so why do people still remember who the Sex Pistols are? Right? Yeah, it's because they didn't represent the music, which was crap. They represented the movement, which meant something. I'm not even sure what. You know, and so when you felt
it in your bones.
If you put a band, if you put like a modern, like a '90s punk revival type band into a mix with these real guttery bands like that, I mean, it's not even. They're a whole different thing. You know, there may be I'm sure there's a punk, but there's always an underground movement of stuff, and I'm sure punk people are still around, right? Mm-hmm. They're still having these punk concerts, and people are still showing up and getting drunk off their butt and jumping off the stage and beating the crap out of each other, wearing leather and having stupid hair. But I mean, it effectively is gone. I mean, on a national level. This leads me to my
next question, Aaron.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on Insane Clown Posse?
Where do I stand on them?
Yeah.
They weren't very good wrestlers, but they were great hustlers. I know a lot about them, believe it or not, because they wrestled.
I figured you did. That's why I asked you.
And so they were the few acts. Listen, they were in WCW, they were in WWF, they were in ECW. They played all the big shows. They host at the Juggalo thing they've got up there. They always have wrestling at it, you know. So and with a lot of big acts that come to town, like big independent acts. I remember. I think it was funny. They were originally signed to Disney's label, and Disney was like, "What the hell is this? Get these guys out of here!" You know, they are perfect workers. They have taken their a unique look and sound, and they have drenched every drop of it out. They found an audience. They connected with them like very few bands, maybe Kiss. There aren't very many bands that connect with their audience like the Insane Clown Posse with Juggalos. Listen, I'm not putting these guys over, although I do like some of their stuff. I'm not gonna lie, and I do. I understand. I appreciate their love of wrestling and the fact what they do for it. I do it because as a wrestling fan. Am I gonna buy one of their albums? No, but I think as rappers, I think they're okay. You know, I think they've got a good sound. If you're into that sort of thing, but
would you go see them if they came to Municipal Auditorium?
Absolutely not. Because they bring their fans, and their fans are out to lunch. The Juggalos are, listen, God bless them, you know, whatever, Allah, whatever you're into. I don't want to hang out with them. You know, I've seen behind-the-scenes footage of the gathering of the Juggalos and stuff, and no thank you, not my bag. But, I mean, all that said, I like the fact, you know, the government considered the Juggalos a cult.
Really?
You know, yeah, they were on the list, you know, and I wouldn't call them a cult, but I would call them they were a massive group of like-minded people that get together and do their thing. And if that's a cult, then that's what they are, man. So, you know, but yeah, I don't hate the Posse. I don't like them as wrestlers. I mean, Violent J's okay.
Is he a pretty good worker?
He's okay. I think, which is the big fat one? Is that Jay? I get him confused. The fat one is a better worker than the thin one. Yeah.
How many people are in ICP?
There's two guys.
Okay. Yeah. Duncan Styles, we're taking some bonus questions.
I was going to say, I thought we got more
here.
Okay.
He says this is a two-part question. He says, a question for me: which piece of retro kit of Aaron's do you admire the most? I'm going to have to go with oh boy. I mean, it's definitely one of the pinball machines. Probably the Whodunit is very impressive.
Yeah.
I like the WWF game. All the pinball machines, the Mr. and Mrs. Pac-Man. I would say just in aggregate, I admire Aaron's pinball collection the
For
most.
some reason, I thought you'd say the Coleco Adam or the Vectrix. I thought you'd say that.
The Coleco Atom, I don't admire it other than its weight and its girth.
Hey,
That's what I admire
when
about
we got that to print, we popped. It was a big pop from us. That was a good day. Yeah.
It was a big pop. All right, so Aaron, here's a question from Duncan.
All right.
Which piece of retro kit of boats do you admire the most?
Well, right now it's that Commodore monitor I'm looking at.
Well, it's broken.
I got hung out to dry.
You don't want to admire it too much.
Let me think. What does Boat have? Boat does have he's got an outstanding pinball machine in his own right. In fact, I was going to say Mario Brothers, but I think I would go after. I like that pinball machine you got because it's challenging and fun. That's a real good game.
I will say that I struck gold with that pinball machine, and that's all thanks to you. I would have never gotten it if we hadn't gone down there that dark and stormy night to pick it up and tie the tarp around it.
Yeah,
so
I love
that was an adventure. Mitsuyama asks, this is a question for you, Aaron. How many pinball machines do you have, and are they a PITA to maintain?
For the second question, yes. And I don't maintain them very well, I might add. I've got, let me see if I can get, and both.
What kind of maintenance work have you done on the pinball machines since you've moved them in?
I do check the batteries in them, but to be honest with you, since the pandemic started, I haven't been out there that much. And some of the work, I did start work on that flipper on the Coney Island, but I have never completed it. So we've got Coney Island, we've got Firepower 2, which is a pretty rare machine, sequel to the very popular Firepower. It's superior to Firepower in every way but one, which is it doesn't have the
multi-ball.
Doesn't have the multi-ball. We've also got Mr. and Miss Pac-Man. We've got WWF Royal Rumble, and we've got Who Done It. Those are the pinball machines we currently own. Yeah.
So yes, okay. So we move on to L. Curtis Boyle. All hail. He says, "What is the best video game artwork or package of all time?"
You want to tackle that one? I'll have to ponder that for a minute.
It's tough.
Those old Atari art it's so good.
Yeah.
It takes games that look like crap, and you're like, I got to play this. Like an Asteroids or Missile Command, you're like, my God, this looks incredible. Those are right up there.
Yeah, I think the name of the guy that did a lot of that art, well, a lot of my favorite Atari art is his name. I think is Cliff Spawn. He did behind me. You can see the art for Surround, which if you've ever played Surround before, it's an incredibly lame game. But the art that he did is amazing. The same thing with his art for Breakout was great. So I'd say any of it, and I think his last name is Spawn, Spahn, but I think his first name is Cliff. I'd go with that.
That's good. I mean, he that guy could go. I mean, his art was off the charts. When I think overall art package, I mean, that's a tough question. I would probably, I'm not gonna lie, it would probably be, and I can't pick one, but it would probably be the Atari art. It'd probably be something like Asteroids or one of the early games, Space Invaders, where they used that guy's art. It tells a story that you don't get from the game, and that stuff sold
and it
the
shows
game.
Like Atari, they had people on salary as artists.
Yeah,
it was a totally different scene than where you're just picking up freelancers, to do game covers. Like they had people that were like their legit career was artist for Atari, and it showed. I mean, and of course these were in the days where you needed to have those artists because the games were barely more than just blocks moving around.
And I give those that right there is the point that I give those extra points, because if you're again, we could go back to like a Psygnosis where the art was awesome, but you also had games like Shadow of the Beast, for example, is an awesome looking game. So you're not trying to sell that with the art of the box. It doesn't hurt. But with the Atari, you had to sell that stuff with that art, and that's what sold the game.
Olaf Hope asks, when will there be a live show from Aaron's Arcade?
Well, I've got to get
Have
my
you ever
internet.
thought about doing it? Just setting up some cameras. You're the camera king now.
Me and Uncle
Setting up some
Larry,
cameras all around there.
me and Uncle Larry have live streamed. So me and you have done shows from out
Yeah,
there.
but that's not the same as having various camera angles set up from everywhere, seeing all the different games set up,
We
having the
don't do that
base
on these
debates
shows,
going on.
Boat. I don't know. The problem with the arcade is the acoustics is really bad because of
Yeah.
the ceiling and the metal. So if we could get a good sound out there, I would love to shoot some video out there.
Yeah, yeah. L. Curtis Boyle asks, have either of you read the DC Comics or Atari video game graphic novels, like Star Raiders or Warlords? Did you think that they were any good, or did you have a favorite?
I have not. I have heard the audio recordings of some of the shows that they did to support the games, but I've not read any of the graphic novels that I remember.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember getting comic books with He-Man characters, but I don't remember getting any comic books. I guess these were after the fact. Were done as graphic novels. So yeah, that I don't know. I mean, it seems like all those would be cool concepts to forge into full-fledged graphic novels. But
Anytime you get a cool comic book that comes with the box, whatever, that's cool. I like that.
when was the first time, Aaron, you heard graphic novel instead of comic book?
The back in the day, people always said that The Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns were the graphic novels. They were the top graphic novels. Now, so those instantly come to mind when I hear graphic novels, right? But I mean, what is a graphic novel? It's just a collection of comic books in like a big digest, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. The first time I heard it, I probably just a throwaway line in an old comic book where they were pushing them. To me, they're just big comics. They're basically big, long comics. The graphic novel makes them sound more grandiose than they are. Although sometimes they're very grandiose.
It's funny. I've never really thought about asking you this before, but I've always wanted to know your opinion. What do you think about all those books like Archie and stuff like that? Did you ever get into them?
I read Richie Rich Digest all the time.
Mm-hmm.
All the time.
Because that's the same publisher as Archie, right?
Yeah. And I Harvey. I used to read this all the time as I was a kid. We've talked this a long time ago, but eventually I just got to the point where I was like, this guy's a rich jerk. Screw it. And I was out. You can only do so much with Richie Rich before it's repeating the same thing over and over.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, it seems, Aaron, that we have run out of questions. And I know that we're getting ready for the big TeamSpeak Irregulars event that's going on in less than an hour. Things are going to kick off. What do we got on the docket for tonight on the old TeamSpeak Irregulars,
Well,
Aaron?
we've went to a double channel action boat. We're going to accommodate two different games at once. And I will be streaming probably both games, frankly. So I'd say we'll probably start off with a little Shell Shock Live. And we may have a Valheim group that starts off right away. But there'll definitely probably be two games. We'll probably use this going forward. And I'm sure Dead by Daylight will get in there at some point. We're looking at some different stuff, but Valheim, boy, the boys are into it, Boat. So who am I to say no to them? It's not necessarily my bag, but I get in there. But I always like some Shell Shock, so we'll definitely get some of that in.
All right. Well, guys, thank you as always for listening to Ask the Amigos. We will see you next month with a new round of questions. Until then,
Adios.